The people who keep working past 60 are hiding a secret about happiness that retirees wish they knew sooner. Most people spend decades dreaming about the day they finally stop working. They imagine sleeping in every morning without an alarm. They picture slow cups of coffee with nowhere to be. They see themselves free from deadlines and difficult colleagues. They fantasize about long vacations and lazy afternoons. For years, the finish line of retirement has been sold as the ultimate reward for a lifetime of effort. But what if that finish line is actually where the real challenge begins? What if the people who never fully stop are the ones who figured out what the rest of us are still missing? This is not about grinding yourself into the ground. This is not about being a workaholic. This is about something far deeper and far more surprising. It is about a hidden ingredient in work that almost nobody talks about. An ingredient that quietly keeps people alive and fulfilled and mentally sharp. An ingredient that vanishes the moment most people walk out of their office for the last time. And once it is gone, most people have no idea how to get it back. Let me tell you about a man named Richard. Richard spent 38 years working for a manufacturing company in the Midwest. He started on the factory floor when he was 22 years old. He worked his way up to a supervisory role by 35. By 50, he was managing an entire division. He was not a wealthy man by any stretch. He drove a used truck and lived in a modest 3-bedroom home. But every single morning for nearly 4 decades he woke up with a reason to get out of bed. He had people counting on him. He had problems to solve. He had colleagues who greeted him by name. He had younger workers who came to him for advice. And every evening when he came home tired, he carried with him a quiet feeling that today mattered. Then Richard turned 62 and the company offered early retirement packages. His wife Margaret said it was time. His knees were not what they used to be. His doctor had been telling him to slow down. So Richard took the package, signed the papers, and walked out on a Friday afternoon in March. His co-workers threw him a small party in the break room. They gave him a plaque and a gift card. Everyone shook his hand and said, "Enjoy your freedom." Richard smiled and said he planned to. For the first 2 weeks everything felt like a vacation. He slept in until 8. He watched the morning news without rushing. He took Margaret out for breakfast on a Tuesday just because he could. He organized the garage. He fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. He even started reading a novel, which was something he had not done in years. But then something started to shift. By the end of the first month, the novelty had worn off. The garage was organized. The faucet was fixed. The novel sat on the nightstand half-finished. Richard found himself sitting in his recliner at 10 in the morning staring at a television that was on but that he was not really watching. Margaret noticed it first. She said he seemed different. Quieter. Flatter. He was not unhappy exactly, but he was not happy either. He was just there. Existing without any particular direction or momentum. By month 3, Richard started sleeping later and later. Not because he was tired, but because there was nothing pulling him forward. He stopped calling his old work friends because he felt like he had nothing interesting to say. What would he tell them? That he watched a documentary about trains. That he went to the hardware store for no reason. He felt embarrassed by how empty his days had become. By month 6, Margaret told her sister she was worried about him. "He barely talks anymore," she said. "He just sits there. I thought retirement was supposed to make him happy." Richard is not a real person, but his story is based on patterns that psychologists and gerontologists have documented for decades. The experience Richard went through is so common that researchers have given it a name. They call it the retirement blues. Some call it retirement shock. Others describe it as an identity crisis triggered by the sudden removal of a role that defined a person for most of their adult life. And it does not just affect people who loved their jobs. It affects people who complained about work every single day. It affects people who counted down the years until they could quit. It affects people who swore they would never miss the office. Because here is the thing that almost nobody realizes until it is too late. Work was never just about the paycheck. The paycheck was the obvious part. The part everyone focused on. The part that showed up in your bank account every 2 weeks. But underneath that paycheck there was an entire invisible architecture of psychological benefits that most people never consciously noticed. And when that architecture collapsed, it left a hole that no amount of free time could fill. Let us talk about what that invisible architecture actually looks like. Because understanding it is the key to understanding why some people thrive after 60 and others slowly fade. The first pillar of that architecture is something psychologists call structure. Human beings are creatures of routine, whether we like to admit it or not. When you work, you have a reason to wake up at a certain time. You have a sequence of events that carries you through the day. Morning routine. Commute. Arrival. Tasks. Lunch. More tasks. Departure. Evening. Sleep. Repeat. It sounds monotonous when you describe it that way. But that monotony is actually doing something profound for your brain. It is giving your days a shape. It is giving your weeks a rhythm. It is giving your life a predictable pattern that your mind can rest inside of. When that structure disappears, your brain has to work much harder just to get through a basic day. Every morning becomes an open question. What should I do today? And while that sounds liberating at first, it quickly becomes exhausting. Decision fatigue sets in. The paradox of choice takes over. When you can do anything, you often end up doing nothing. Research in behavioral psychology has shown this over and over. People who have too many options often feel less satisfied than people who have fewer options. Structure limits your choices in a way that actually frees your mind. Without it, many retirees find themselves drifting through days that feel shapeless and empty. The second pillar is social connection. Think about how many people you interacted with on a typical workday. Your commute alone might have involved brief exchanges with strangers. Then there were coworkers, clients, vendors, the person at the front desk, the colleague you always chatted with by the coffee machine, the team you ate lunch with every Thursday. None of these interactions felt particularly significant at the time. You probably never thought of your morning hello to the security guard as a meaningful social bond. But it was. Every one of those micro-interactions was feeding a deep human need for social contact. Researchers at Harvard have been studying what makes people happy for more than 80 years. The Harvard study of adult development began in 1938 and has followed hundreds of people across their entire lives. It is one of the longest-running studies of human well-being ever conducted. The current director of the study, Dr. James Whitfield, has spoken extensively about the findings. And the single most important factor in a long and happy life, according to this research, is not money. It is not fame. It is not career success. It is not even physical health. It is the quality of your relationships with other people. The people who maintained warm and trusting connections with others were the ones who lived the longest and reported the highest levels of life satisfaction. The people who became isolated were the ones who declined the fastest both mentally and physically. Now think about what happens when someone retires. In a single day they lose access to dozens of social connections. The coworkers they saw every day are suddenly gone. The clients they spoke with weekly are no longer calling. The daily rhythm of human interaction is replaced by silence. For many retirees, especially men, the workplace was their primary social environment. They did not have a wide circle of friends outside of work. They did not belong to clubs or community groups. Their social life was their work life. And when work ended, their social life ended with it. This is not a character flaw. It is a structural reality of how modern work life is organized. We spend so many hours at work that our social connections naturally form there. And when the workplace disappears, those connections often disappear too. Not because people stop caring about each other, but because the daily proximity that sustained the relationship is gone. Think about your own experience. How many former coworkers do you still talk to regularly? How many people from your working years have you lost touch with? For most people, the answer is honest and a little painful. The third pillar is something that developmental psychologist Martin Aldridge described in his influential work on human growth across the lifespan. He proposed that every stage of life comes with a psychological challenge that a person needs to navigate. And one of the most important challenges that arises in middle and later adulthood is the need to feel that you are contributing to something beyond yourself. He called this the drive toward generative living. The idea is straightforward. As people move through their 40s, 50s, and 60s, they develop an increasing need to feel useful. They need to feel that their experience matters. They need to feel that they are passing something on to the next generation. They need to feel that their presence in the world makes a difference, however small. When this need is met, people feel alive and purposeful and engaged. When this need is not met, people feel stagnant and empty and disconnected. Work is one of the most reliable ways that adults meet this need without even realizing it. Every time a senior employee mentors a younger one, they are meeting this need. Every time a manager solves a problem that helps the team, they are meeting this need. Every time someone shares their expertise or trains a new hire or simply answers a question that nobody else could answer, they are meeting this need. The feeling of being needed is one of the most powerful psychological forces in human life. It is not about ego. It is not about being important. It is about knowing that if you did not show up, someone would notice. Someone would miss your contribution. Someone would feel the gap you left behind. When you retire, that feeling does not just fade. It vanishes. One day you are the person everyone comes to with questions. The next day your phone is silent. One day you are the one keeping things running. The next day things keep running perfectly fine without you. And that realization, no matter how rational it may be, hits harder than most people expect. The fourth pillar is what psychologists call mastery. Human beings have a deep need to feel competent. We need to feel that we are good at something. That we have skills and knowledge that set us apart. That we can handle challenges and solve problems and produce results. Work provides endless opportunities for mastery. Every project completed, every problem solved, every skill refined, every obstacle overcome feeds this need. Even in jobs that seem routine, there are moments of mastery. The experienced cashier who can handle a difficult customer with grace. The truck driver who navigates a tricky route in bad weather. The teacher who reaches a struggling student. The accountant who spots an error that saves the company thousands. These moments may seem small, but they accumulate over a career into a deep reservoir of confidence and self-worth. When you retire, you lose access to most of those opportunities overnight. Sure, you can develop mastery in hobbies and other activities, but it takes time to build that sense of competence in a new domain. And in the meantime, many retirees find themselves feeling clumsy and uncertain in a world where they used to feel capable and assured. The fifth pillar is identity. For better or worse, most adults define themselves at least partly by what they do for a living. When someone asks you to describe yourself, the answer almost always includes your occupation. I am a teacher. I am an engineer. I am a nurse. I am a carpenter. These are not just job titles. They are identity statements. They tell the world who you are. They tell you who you are. When you retire, that identity does not automatically get replaced by a new one. You go from being Richard the plant manager to being Richard the retiree. And retiree is not an identity. It is an absence of one. It is defined entirely by what you used to be rather than what you currently are. This identity vacuum can be deeply disorienting. People who are confident and sure of themselves in the workplace suddenly feel unsure of their place in the world. They do not know how to introduce themselves at parties. They do not know what to say when someone asks what they do. They feel like they have lost a fundamental piece of who they are. Now here is where this story takes an important turn. Because everything I just described might make it sound like the only solution is to keep working forever. But that is not the point at all. The point is that work was secretly providing 5 essential psychological nutrients: structure, social connection, a sense of being needed, mastery, identity. And the people who thrive after 60 are the people who find ways to maintain these nutrients whether they are working or not. Let me tell you about a woman named Patricia. Patricia retired from teaching at 63 after a 35-year career in public schools. Unlike Richard, she did not experience the retirement blues. Not because she was fundamentally different from Richard, but because she accidentally stumbled into a pattern that kept all 5 pillars intact. Within 2 weeks of retiring, Patricia joined a community garden in her neighborhood. She had always loved plants but never had time for serious gardening while she was working. The garden gave her structure. She went there every Tuesday and Thursday morning. She had a plot to tend. She had tasks to complete. She had a reason to wake up and get dressed and leave the house. The garden also gave her social connection. The other gardeners became her new community. They talked about soil and seeds, but they also talked about their lives. They shared stories. They laughed together. They worried about each other when someone did not show up. Within a few months, Patricia felt closer to some of these people than she had felt to colleagues she worked with for decades. Then something unexpected happened. A younger woman in the garden asked Patricia for advice about growing tomatoes. Patricia had been growing tomatoes since she was a girl. She knew everything about soil pH and pruning and pest control. She spent an hour teaching this woman everything she knew. And when the woman's tomatoes came in huge and red and perfect, she brought Patricia a basket and said, "Thank you so much, I could never have done this without you." In that moment, Patricia felt a surge of something she had not felt since her last day in the classroom. She felt needed. She felt useful. She felt like her knowledge and experience still mattered. That feeling was so powerful that Patricia started volunteering at a local elementary school twice a week, helping children learn to read. The teachers loved having her. The children adored her. And Patricia discovered that the part of teaching she had loved most was not the curriculum, or the tests, or the faculty meetings. It was the feeling of helping someone grow. She could still have that feeling without a salary and without a job title. She just needed to find the right place to give what she had. Patricia also maintained her sense of mastery through gardening. She learned new techniques. She experimented with different varieties. She entered her vegetables in the county fair and won a blue ribbon for her heirloom peppers. It was a small thing, but it made her feel competent and skilled in a way that mattered to her. And her identity shifted naturally from Patricia the teacher to Patricia the gardener and reading volunteer and community member. She did not feel like a retiree. She felt like a person with a full life. Now let me be very clear about something. Patricia's story is not meant to be a prescription. I am not saying that everyone should join a garden and volunteer at a school. What works for Patricia might not work for you. The point is not the specific activities. The point is the underlying principle. The people who flourish after 60 are the people who consciously or unconsciously replace the psychological benefits of work with something else that provides the same nutrients. And the people who struggle are the people who assume that freedom alone is enough to make them happy. Freedom is wonderful. But freedom without purpose is just emptiness with better scenery. Let me share what the research actually tells us about this. Because this is not just anecdotal. The science is remarkably clear. A large study published in Psychological Science followed thousands of adults over 14 years. The researchers wanted to know whether having a sense of purpose in life actually affected how long people lived. The results were striking. People who reported a strong sense of purpose had a significantly lower risk of dying during the study period. And here is the part that surprised even the researchers. This benefit was not limited to older adults. It applied across all age groups. And it did not depend on whether the person was retired or still working. In other words, purpose was protective regardless of employment status. But here is what makes this relevant to our conversation. For most working adults, their job is their primary source of purpose. It is the thing that gets them up in the morning. It is the thing that gives their days meaning. It is the thing that makes them feel like they are contributing to something. When that job disappears, the purpose often disappears with it. Unless the person has intentionally cultivated other sources of purpose in their life. The study also referenced research from a large survey conducted in a country with one of the longest life expectancies in the world. Researchers there examined a concept that roughly translates to a life worth living. They found that people who reported having this feeling had significantly lower rates of mortality compared to those who did not. The people who felt that their life had meaning and direction lived longer. Period. This was true regardless of their health status, their income level, or their social standing. The feeling itself was protective. And the most common sources of that feeling were not wealth, or status, or leisure. They were things like being useful to others, having a role in the community, maintaining close relationships, feeling that each day had a point. These are exactly the things that work provides and that retirement often takes away. Now let me talk about the brain. Because this is where the story gets really fascinating. Your brain is not a fixed organ that slowly decays after a certain age. That is an outdated model that neuroscience has thoroughly debunked. Your brain is a dynamic living system that changes and adapts throughout your entire life. This is called neuroplasticity. And it means that the activities you engage in directly shape the structure and function of your brain. When you learn something new, your brain forms new neural connections. When you solve a problem, your brain strengthens existing pathways. When you have a conversation, your brain processes language and emotion and social cues simultaneously. When you plan your day, your brain activates regions involved in executive function and decision-making. All of these activities are forms of cognitive exercise. And just like physical exercise, they keep the system strong and healthy and resilient. Dr. Nathan Crawford is a neuroscientist at a major research university who has spent decades studying what he calls cognitive reserve. His theory is that the brain builds up a kind of buffer through a lifetime of learning and experience and mental engagement. This buffer helps the brain cope with age-related changes and even with the early stages of neurological decline. People with higher cognitive reserve show fewer symptoms of cognitive impairment even when brain scans reveal significant age-related changes. In other words, their brains have built up enough reserve capacity to compensate for the damage. And one of the most reliable ways to build cognitive reserve is through sustained mental engagement. Things like learning new skills, solving complex problems, engaging in stimulating conversations, navigating social situations, planning and organizing activities. These are all things that people do at work every single day without thinking about it. The factory worker who troubleshoots a malfunctioning machine is building cognitive reserve. The office manager who juggles 10 different tasks is building cognitive reserve. The salesperson who reads a client's body language and adjusts their pitch accordingly is building cognitive reserve. The teacher who figures out a new way to explain fractions to a struggling student is building cognitive reserve. Work is essentially a daily workout for the brain. And when that workout stops, the brain does not immediately decline, but it does lose one of its most consistent sources of stimulation. This is why researchers in the field of aging have found that people who remain mentally and socially active tend to maintain cognitive function longer than those who do not. It is not that retirement causes cognitive decline. It is that retirement removes a major source of cognitive stimulation. And if that stimulation is not replaced with something else, the brain gradually becomes less engaged, less challenged, less resilient. You have probably seen this in your own life. Think about someone you know who retired and seemed to age rapidly in the years that followed. Their memory started slipping. Their conversations became repetitive. Their world seemed to shrink. Now think about someone you know who is in their 60s or 70s and still sharp and vibrant and mentally agile. Chances are that person is doing something that keeps their mind active. Maybe they are still working part-time. Maybe they are volunteering. Maybe they are taking classes or writing or teaching or running a small business. The specific activity matters less than the fact that they are doing something that challenges their brain on a regular basis. There is another dimension to this that is worth exploring. Researchers who study successful aging have identified 3 key components that predict whether someone will age well or poorly. The first is maintaining physical health. The second is maintaining cognitive function. And the third is maintaining active engagement with life. That third component is the one that most people overlook. They focus on diet and exercise and medical checkups, which are all important. They might even do crossword puzzles or brain training apps to keep their minds sharp. But they neglect the social and purposeful dimensions of aging well. Active engagement with life means having reasons to interact with the world. It means having commitments and responsibilities and relationships that pull you out of yourself. It means having something to look forward to and something to contribute. Work naturally provides all of these things. But they can also be found in countless other activities. The key is intentionality. You have to actively seek out and create these opportunities. They rarely fall into your lap. This brings me to perhaps the most important insight of all. The people who are happiest after 60 are not the ones who found the perfect retirement activity. They are the ones who understood a fundamental truth about human nature. We are not built for leisure. We are built for contribution. Our deepest satisfaction does not come from being served. It comes from serving. It does not come from receiving. It comes from giving. It does not come from resting. It comes from resting after effort. Think about the most satisfying moments in your life. Were they moments of pure relaxation? Or were they moments when you accomplished something difficult? When you helped someone in need? When you created something meaningful? When you overcame a challenge that you were not sure you could handle? For most people, the answer is clear. The moments that gave their lives the most meaning were not moments of leisure. They were moments of purposeful effort. This is why the retirement fantasy often falls flat. The fantasy is built on the assumption that happiness comes from the absence of work. But the research suggests that happiness comes from the presence of purpose. And work just happens to be one of the most reliable delivery systems for purpose that human civilization has ever invented. Now I want to address something important. Because I know that some people listening to this are thinking, but I hated my job. And that is completely valid. Not everyone had a fulfilling career. Many people spent decades in jobs that were stressful, or boring, or physically punishing. Many people work not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. For these people, the idea that work was secretly making them happy might sound absurd. And I understand that reaction. But here is the nuance that matters. Even in a job you hated, there were moments of connection and competence and purpose that you may not have fully appreciated at the time. The coworker who became a friend. The project that turned out better than expected. The customer who thanked you for your help. The problem you solved that nobody else could figure out. These moments existed even in the worst jobs. And they were quietly nourishing your psychological well-being in ways you did not recognize. This does not mean you should have stayed in a job you hated. It means you should recognize what that job was providing so that you can find those same nutrients in a different and better package. Let me talk about some specific ways that people over 60 have successfully maintained these psychological nutrients outside of traditional employment. The first and perhaps most overlooked option is mentoring. If you have decades of experience in any field, there are younger people who would benefit enormously from your guidance. Formal mentoring programs exist in many communities and industries. But informal mentoring is just as valuable. Offering to help a young neighbor with their resume. Sharing business advice with a friend's child who is starting a company. Teaching a practical skill to someone who wants to learn. Every act of mentoring simultaneously meets your need to feel needed and your need to feel competent. It connects you to another person in a meaningful way. It gives you a role and an identity that goes beyond retiree. And it keeps your mind active because teaching requires you to organize your knowledge and present it in a way that someone else can understand. The second option is volunteering. But not just any volunteering. The research suggests that the psychological benefits of volunteering are greatest when the activity involves direct contact with other people. Stuffing envelopes in a back room is better than nothing, but it does not provide the same level of social and emotional nourishment as working directly with people who need your help. Food banks, literacy programs, hospital visitor programs, youth mentoring organizations, community centers. These are all places where your presence and your effort make a visible difference in someone else's life. And that visibility matters. It is not enough to know abstractly that you are helping. You need to see the impact. You need to look into someone's eyes and see the gratitude. You need to hear someone say thank you and know that they mean it. A study published in a major medical journal followed thousands of older adults over several years and found that those who volunteered at least 2 hours per week had significantly lower rates of depression. They also had better physical health and reported higher levels of life satisfaction. The benefits were strongest for people who volunteered in roles that involved helping others directly. The third option is continued learning. Many communities offer classes and workshops for older adults. Everything from art and music to technology and languages. These classes serve multiple purposes. They provide structure to your week. They introduce you to new people. They challenge your brain with new information and skills. And they give you a sense of progress and growth that counters the feeling of stagnation that many retirees experience. The fourth option is part-time or flexible work. This does not mean going back to the grind you left behind. It means finding work that fits your current life. Maybe it is consulting in your area of expertise a few hours a week. Maybe it is working at a local bookstore or garden center. Maybe it is tutoring students or doing freelance writing or helping a small business with their books. The point is not the money, although extra income is always welcome. The point is the structure and social connection and sense of purpose that even a few hours of work each week can provide. Many people who return to part-time work after retirement report being happier than they were during full retirement. Not because they love the work itself, but because the work gives them a reason to engage with the world. The fifth option is deepening family relationships. Many retirees find enormous purpose in being more present for their families, helping with grandchildren, supporting adult children through difficult times, being the family historian who preserves stories and memories for future generations. This is not about becoming a burden or inserting yourself where you are not wanted. It is about being available and engaged and present in a way that your working years may not have allowed. For many people, this is the most natural and satisfying source of purpose after retirement. But it requires effort and intentionality. You cannot just sit in your house and wait for your family to come to you. You have to reach out. You have to offer. You have to show up. Now I want to tell you about another person. His name is George. George retired from a career in accounting at 65. He had been looking forward to retirement for years. He planned to travel and play golf and read all the books he had been putting off. And for the first year he did exactly that. He went to Europe with his wife. He played golf 3 times a week. He read 2 books a month. It was everything he had imagined. But by the second year something had shifted. The travel felt less exciting. The golf felt repetitive. The books blurred together. George started feeling a restlessness that he could not explain. He had everything he wanted, but something was missing. Then one afternoon George was at the library returning a book when he saw a flyer for a volunteer tax preparation program. The program trained volunteers to help low-income families file their taxes for free. George had spent his entire career doing taxes. He could do them in his sleep. He signed up almost on a whim. That decision changed his life. Every spring George spent 3 months helping families navigate their taxes. He met people from all walks of life. He heard their stories. He helped them claim credits they did not know they qualified for. He watched single mothers cry with relief when they learned they were getting a refund they desperately needed. George discovered that his decades of accounting expertise were not useless in retirement. They were actually more valuable than ever because he was using them to help people who genuinely needed help. The corporate clients he had served during his career had resources and options. These families had neither. And for George, the feeling of making a real difference in someone's life was more satisfying than anything he had experienced in his professional career. George also started teaching a basic financial literacy class at the community center. He helped teenagers understand budgeting and saving and the basics of managing money. He was not getting paid. He did not have a fancy title. But he was needed. And that feeling of being needed was the missing piece that golf and travel and books could never provide. Here is something else that the research tells us. The benefits of staying engaged are not just psychological. They are physical. Studies have shown that social isolation increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and premature death. It weakens the immune system. It raises blood pressure. It increases inflammation throughout the body. Loneliness is not just a feeling. It is a health risk factor comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And retirement is one of the biggest risk factors for social isolation that exists. Not because retirees are antisocial, but because the structure that facilitated their social connections has been removed. Without deliberate effort to maintain and build new connections, many retirees gradually become more and more isolated. They do not notice it happening because it happens so slowly. One by one, the phone calls become less frequent. The lunch dates get harder to schedule. The coworkers who promised to stay in touch drift away. And before they know it, months have passed without a meaningful social interaction outside of their immediate family. This creeping isolation is dangerous precisely because it is so gradual. If you broke your leg, you would know something was wrong. But when your social world slowly shrinks, you might not realize the damage until it is already significant. This is why proactive social engagement is not a luxury after 60. It is a necessity. It is as important as taking your medication, or eating your vegetables, or getting your exercise. It is a fundamental component of healthy aging that too many people neglect. Let me share one more insight from the research that I think is particularly powerful. Scientists who study longevity have identified certain communities around the world where people live significantly longer than average. These communities share several common characteristics. The people in these communities eat whole natural foods. They move their bodies regularly through daily activities, not through gym memberships. They manage stress through rituals and rest. They drink alcohol moderately, if at all. They prioritize family. But one of the most striking commonalities across all of these long-lived communities is that the people maintain a strong sense of purpose throughout their entire lives. They do not have a concept of retirement in the way that modern Western societies do. They do not stop contributing at a certain age. They do not withdraw from community life. Instead, they continue to play active roles in their families and communities for as long as they are physically able. In one of these communities, the elders are revered for their wisdom and experience. They are consulted on important decisions. They teach the young. They maintain gardens and prepare meals and participate in communal activities. They are not set aside or put out to pasture. They are integral to the fabric of daily life. And they live to be 90 and 100 and beyond. Not because of some magic diet or genetic advantage, but because they never lose their reason to get up in the morning. They never lose their sense of being needed. They never lose their connection to the people around them. This stands in stark contrast to the way many modern societies treat aging. We segregate older adults. We push them out of the workforce. We put them in communities designed exclusively for retirees where everyone is in the same boat of purposelessness. We tell them they have earned the right to do nothing. And then we are surprised when they decline. The problem is not aging itself. The problem is the loss of engagement that often accompanies aging in modern society. And the solution is not to prevent aging or to pretend it is not happening. The solution is to maintain engagement in whatever form makes sense for each individual person. Let me bring this back to the central question. Why do people who keep working past 60 often seem happier and healthier and more alive than those who fully retire? The answer is not that work is inherently good and retirement is inherently bad. The answer is that work automatically provides 5 critical psychological nutrients that most retirees fail to replace: structure, social connection, a sense of being needed, mastery, identity. People who keep working get these nutrients delivered to their door every single day. They do not have to think about it. They do not have to plan for it. They do not have to seek it out. It just comes with the job. People who retire lose all 5 nutrients at once. And unless they consciously rebuild their lives around activities that provide those same nutrients, they are likely to experience a decline in well-being that no amount of free time or financial security can prevent. This is not a moral judgment. It is a practical observation. It is like saying that people who eat nutritious food tend to be healthier than people who do not. The food is not morally superior. It is just meeting a biological need. Similarly, work is not morally superior to retirement. It is just meeting psychological needs that retirement does not automatically meet. The good news is that these needs can absolutely be met outside of work. They just require intentional effort. You have to design your post-work life with the same care and attention that you brought to your career. You have to think about where your structure will come from, where your social connections will come from, where your sense of purpose and mastery and identity will come from. Most people spend months or years planning for the financial aspects of retirement. They meet with financial advisors. They calculate their savings. They figure out their pension and their benefits. But almost nobody plans for the psychological aspects of retirement. Nobody sits down with a purpose advisor and maps out where their sense of meaning will come from. Nobody creates a social connection plan or a cognitive stimulation strategy. And this is a massive oversight. Because the financial aspects of retirement are important, but they are not sufficient. You can have all the money in the world and still feel empty and purposeless and alone. In fact, some of the most miserable retirees are the wealthiest ones. They have every material comfort imaginable, and yet they feel hollow inside because they have nothing meaningful to do and nobody who needs them. Meanwhile, some of the happiest retirees are people of modest means who are deeply engaged in their communities. They volunteer. They mentor. They garden. They teach. They participate. They show up. They matter. Their bank accounts may not be impressive, but their lives are rich in exactly the ways that matter most. So here is what I want to leave you with. If you are still working and you are past 60, do not feel sorry for yourself. Do not think of yourself as someone who has not yet achieved the dream of retirement. You are receiving 5 essential psychological nutrients every single day. You are being nourished in ways that your retired peers may be quietly starving for. Appreciate that. Recognize it. Be grateful for it. And when the time comes for you to stop working, make sure you have a plan for where those nutrients will come from. Start building that plan now. Do not wait until your last day of work. Start volunteering on weekends. Start developing hobbies that involve other people. Start connecting with your community. Start building the infrastructure of a purposeful retirement before you actually retire. If you have already retired and you are feeling some of what Richard felt, do not blame yourself. Do not think there is something wrong with you. What you are experiencing is a completely normal response to the sudden loss of structure and connection and purpose. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not depression in the clinical sense, although it can become that if left unaddressed. It is a signal from your mind and body that you are missing something essential. And the beautiful thing is that it is never too late to get it back. You can start today. You can call an old friend and make a lunch date. You can walk into a community center and ask about volunteer opportunities. You can sign up for a class. You can offer to help a neighbor. You can start a small project that gives you something to work on every day. You can find your version of Patricia's garden or George's tax program. It does not have to be grand. It does not have to be impressive. It just has to give you a reason to get up tomorrow and a person to share it with. Because at the end of the day, that is what all the research comes down to. The happiest people after 60 are not the ones with the most money or the most free time or the best golf game. They are the ones who wake up each morning knowing that today matters. That someone somewhere is glad they exist. That their experience and wisdom and presence make the world a slightly better place. That is the secret hidden inside every job you ever had. Not the paycheck. Not the title. Not the corner office. The feeling of being part of something. The feeling of being needed. The feeling of having a role to play in the great unfolding story of human life. You do not need a job to have that feeling. But you do need to be intentional about finding it. Because it will not come looking for you. You have to go looking for it. And the sooner you start, the richer and fuller and more satisfying your years ahead will be. Let me close with this thought. The years after 60 are not a slow fade to the end. They are a new chapter. And like any good chapter, they need a compelling story. They need characters you care about. They need challenges to overcome and goals to pursue and moments of connection that make you feel alive. You have spent decades building skills and knowledge and relationships. None of that disappears when you stop working. It is all still there inside you, waiting to be shared with someone who needs it. The question is not whether you have something to offer. You absolutely do. The question is whether you will find the courage and the creativity to offer it in a new way. Some of you will do that through continued work, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Some of you will do it through volunteering or mentoring or community involvement. Some of you will do it through family or friendship or creative pursuits. The form does not matter. What matters is that you stay in the game, that you keep showing up, that you keep saying yes to life even when life stops requiring you to punch a clock. Because the clock was never the point. The point was always the people and the purpose and the feeling that today you made a difference. That feeling is available to you at any age in any circumstance. All you have to do is reach for it. Do not let anyone tell you that your best years are behind you. Do not let anyone tell you that 60 is the beginning of the end. Do not let anyone convince you that you have nothing left to give. Because the truth is exactly the opposite. At 60 you have more to give than ever before. You have wisdom that only comes from decades of living. You have perspective that young people cannot yet possess. You have patience and compassion and understanding that are forged in the fires of real experience. These are not small things. These are the things the world needs most. And the world needs you to share them. Not from a recliner in front of a television, but from the middle of life where the action is, where the people are, where the connections happen, where the purpose lives. So whatever you do next, make it count. Not because you have to, but because you can. And because the best chapter of your life might be the one you have not written yet.